how do you decide who is the spokesperson? How do you decide what your public face is? How do you decide who ends up on the working group? Stuff like that. So and luckily we have a lot of people who are conscious of this sort of thing, and so it comes up, right? How do we, what are the factors we should consider in people we nominate for working groups and so on and so forth? And we always make sure that we take into account some of these issues. But I do think that actually going forward, if you want more female candidates, for example, you have to make that your explicit goal. So I'm from Canada, and the province of Alberta just elected a record number of female caucus members for its provincial legislature. And that was because of a conscious policy nominating 50% women. And that means that men have to put forward women's names. That's just functionally how it has to work. Yeah, I mean, I hesitated to take on the role of spokesperson. Farhan and I are going to split it up so that he does it after the working group actually produces its results. And we decided to do it this way because I've done more research on investment stuff at this point, although he will definitely catch up within the next year, and then we'll both be able to cover that off. But my instinct was to step back, and I think that is part of this process, right, is to ask, why is that happening? Why am I hesitant to be exposed to the media? I think there are many reasons for that. One of them is just socialization from early childhood onward. But I think also there is some concern about, there are also subtle ways in which the media can treat women unfairly, and people see that and then have hesitations about putting themselves in that same situation. It would look like a lot more confident people and introverts kind of putting on at least an extroversion hat for the time being. I think that is a confidence issue. I think that's the issue with people who don't have kind of the, I'm not going to say automatic confidence that comes with being a middle-aged white man, but certainly it's much easier to get there if you have the kind of dominant characteristics of powerful people. So yeah, that's like a personal project and a societal one that has feedback loops built into it. So yeah, it's very complicated. I certainly don't have the answer to it myself, but it's something that we've struggled with as a group and found some ways of dealing with.
And just in terms of your own expertise, Ellen, you mentioned you're doing research on the investment side of things. Which areas are you have you been doing your research in, and how do you think you'll be going about sharing that research once you're done?
That's a very good question. We're actually currently pulling together the final draft of a document that's meant to be a readable version of all the research that we've been compiling. So it'll include kind of a one-pager on each of the investigative projects that we want the working group to look at in more detail. We've tried to make that in plain language, in accessible, kind of readable terms, short sentences and so on and so forth, but still answering people's questions. So that's a huge challenge, but currently we've got a few pages that explain a lot. The challenge will be in getting them to zoom out. I think that investment offices tend to have a fairly narrow remit, and that involves choosing fund managers and buying and selling shares if they have direct investments. And that really is the end of the story for them. What we're asking them to do is a lot more complicated, and would involve having that office or an adjunct office take on much greater responsibilities. So, working with other investors, setting up a whole new energy efficiency program, doing direct investments in renewable energy or green venture capital. Those are all things that would involve an expansion of the team or some kind of collaboration with an outside office. Yeah, and I think that's, separately, my PhD research is on kind of ethics and economics, right? So in a way, things are set up such that ethics are not taken into account automatically, certainly. So you would need to have a lot of personal interest on the part of the investment managers to make any of that happen. And they don't have time currently. That's not a part of their remit, and they don't actually have expertise in that specifically because they weren't hired for that purpose. So what we're basically asking is to kind of make this a much more multi-layered approach, and that will be difficult. It's a huge challenge, but we're hoping that with really good evidence as to the kind of financial feasibility, but also the ethical imperative, that we'll be able to actually move forward on this. Well, I think that the research project, the investigative process itself, will involve kind of collaborating with some other institutions, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and a lot of really good research has already been done on this. But I actually think that in particular the kind of cooperative shareholder engagement project will necessitate getting in touch with larger pension funds, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, and others who have already kind of demonstrated that they have an openness to these sorts of discussions. So I kind of see that as being almost an automatic part of the follow-through on some of these issues. No, I think it's integral, and I'll explain a couple of reasons I think that's true. One is actually rather uniquely, the Bank of England, for example, has been looking into things like climate change risk and its effects on the financial system, and a few other important research projects like that really aren't being undertaken anywhere else in the same way. So that's a big piece. On the other side, if we do end up with some coordination among institutional investors on the shareholder engagement side of things, we could end up pushing for example, an end to lobbying against carbon taxes, for example, and other climate change legislation on the part of these big companies. And a lot of people think that actually could be more important than any other single measure, because really it's the vested interests in the fossil fuel sector that are keeping politics from moving along with public opinion, which is now really quite overwhelmingly in favor of doing something about climate change. I mean, it's not usually the issue that's at the top of people's lists, but certainly now in most countries, this is the overwhelming majority of the population is in favor of doing something. So you have to see what are the political barriers, and a lot of this could be addressed at the investor level, strangely.
Okay, Ellen, thank you very much.
Thank you.